We published the story on Saturday morning because it was last week that we learned clearer than ever before that it is Kane's desire to leave Tottenham this season.
Jack, welcome back onto the show. You're becoming a regular here, and with good reason. We're talking about Harry Kane, and I want to start by saying I'm aware that many Spurs fans don't want us to talk about Harry Kane. We did so on the Ornstein and Chapman podcast not so long ago. I was also on television talking about him, and so I'm not going to throw you under the bus on this one and put it all on your shoulders, because I've reported similar things, that Kane would like or be open to leaving Tottenham in pursuit of trying to win multiple major trophies, which is his career ambition. We're not saying it's going to happen. And in fact, when I did report that, there was quite a big reaction among Tottenham fans, because on the one hand, I was saying that he would like to leave. And on the other hand, I said many people I speak to say that they see him finishing his career at Tottenham. Both of those are possible because it's a desire and a reality. And we're going to get into speaking about that today. And so the point of this show comes off the back of your piece that you wrote with Ollie Kay on Saturday, which happened to be ahead of Tottenham's home game against Manchester United, in which you went into great depth in explaining why Harry Kane wants to leave Tottenham, the circumstances around it, and whether it's going to be possible. We're going to explore all of that. But I want to start by asking you how we've come to this point. Why are we talking about it now? When did Harry Kane decide he wanted to leave Tottenham?
Hi, David. Well, thanks for having me on the show. I think the issue of timing is obviously hugely important here. Since publishing the story, we did have quite a few messages from people saying you're trying to destabilise Tottenham ahead of this massive game against Manchester United. I can guarantee readers and viewers and listeners that that is not the case. We did not publish the story on Saturday morning because of the Manchester United game. In that sense, it was entirely coincidental. We published the story on Saturday morning because it was last week that we learned clearer than ever before that it is Kane's desire to leave Tottenham this season. In terms of when Kane himself decided this is what he wanted, well, I imagine it's probably quite a gradual thing over the course of the last few years. Kane obviously signed that 6-year deal at Tottenham in the summer of 2018. The following season, Tottenham, of course, got to the Champions League final when Mauricio Pochettino was there. And at that moment, I'm sure Kane did think that Tottenham was the best place for him because they were in a Champions League final, which is obviously the pinnacle of the club game. In the last 2 years since then, Pochettino's been sacked, been replaced by Jose Mourinho. Kane was very excited by the appointment of Mourinho. He remains a big Mourinho fan, but the reality on the pitch is that Spurs are no longer competing for the biggest trophies. They came 6th in the Premier League last year. They're currently 7th, I think. I'd be pretty surprised at this point if they made it back up into the top 4. So it's quite obvious, unfortunately, that Tottenham are no longer competing at the very top end for the Premier League, for the Champions League, as they were under Pochettino. And that, I think, is why Kane has decided that, frankly, after 17 years at the club, and he's played fantastically well for them ever since Pochettino put him into the first team in 2014, it might be time for a change of scene and a move to a club that is competing for those big trophies again. So I think it's a gradual move on Kane's part to reach this point, but that really is the background as to why we ran the story on Saturday morning.
The Athletic is currently running a fantastic price for new subscribers of less than £1 or $1 per week for the first 6 months. That's 40% off an annual subscription. Just head to theathletic.com/Ask Ornstein. That's theathletic.com/Ask Ornstein. Now, before we get back to chatting with Jack, a question for you guys. If you were Harry Kane, what would you do this summer? Let me know in the comments below.
I speak to quite a lot of people within the game, trusted contacts and sources, and I know some people watching this won't like to hear that, and they often say, who are these people and sources? Tell us who they are. You're hiding behind anonymous sources that, for all we know, could be fabricated or whatever. But I think the only thing we can say on that is that people need to trust us, and if they respect our reporting, journalism, integrity, then they'll know that we do so in good faith and we follow due process. Some of those people have described Kane's desire to me as being desperate to leave. Now, I don't want people to take that out of context. It's not that he's deeply distraught to be at Tottenham Hotspur. He loves the club. He's their talismanic figure, and I'm sure he would love nothing more than to fulfill his dreams of winning trophies at Tottenham Hotspur. Where does this situation actually go from here? And the key point many Spurs fans will want to know is, how realistic is it?
Well, that's a huge question. And like you say, David, it's not really just down to Harry Kane. You know, if it was down to Harry Kane, I think he would move to whether it's Manchester City, Manchester United, a club who he feels can challenge for the Premier League and the Champions League. But ultimately, it's down to Daniel Levy. And that means it's a very difficult situation to predict. I've had lots of people asking me, what do you predict will happen? And I mean, I don't know what's going to happen. That's the first thing to say. If I had to guess, I'd say it's probably at least as likely that he stays as that he might go. Tottenham have been incredibly insistent for years that Kane is not for sale. That remains their position, not for sale at any price. I'm sure that, you know, the first time that any club makes an offer for Harry Kane this summer, Daniel Levy will say no. It might be that at some point a club offers enough money that Daniel Levy changes his mind and thinks, actually, I'm better off with the money than with Harry Kane. But we don't know that yet. This is all, you know, we're speculating about events that will happen over the course of this summer. But it's certainly not a guarantee that Kane will leave. And I can totally envisage Kane being a Tottenham player at the start of next season.
Personally, I would go further than your point on you could just as well see he stays as he goes. I think just from people I speak to, and hands up if I'm wrong, that it's far more likely that he stays than he leaves. Yeah. For a number of factors. Of course, the market is very difficult at the moment. We're still in a pandemic. Daniel Levy, I'm told, would not sell to a fellow Premier League club under any circumstance. And so therefore, I don't think they'll push to the levels that they would need to tempt him. And then clubs on the continent, like Real Madrid or Barcelona or Paris Saint-Germain, don't seem to be in a financial position to be able to produce that sort of money that might tempt Levy into reconsidering his position. That brings us perfectly onto the market, because you've written in the piece about situations at other clubs and in the pandemic as well. We mentioned in my Monday column with Laurie Whitwell that Kane is second on Manchester United's list behind Erling Haaland. Maybe that's replicated at other clubs as well. So if some of these massive clubs don't get their number one choice in this coming transfer market, do you think that could affect their decision on whether or not to pursue Kane?
Well, I certainly think that this summer all starts with Erling Haaland, and clearly he is City and Manchester United and Real Madrid's first choice. And then depending on what happens with Haaland, then I think after that, clubs will look at Kane and other options out there. Obviously, Haaland has the benefit of being much younger than Kane. So I suppose one of the questions is, would City, United, other interested clubs value Kane as highly as they would value Haaland? And then how much money would they offer Tottenham for Kane? My own view with this is that I think that for City, signing Kane would represent a big change in their policy. You know, City have been though City obviously spend a lot of money, as we all know, they've been very keen not to spend the top transfer fees on any individual player. I think their record signing is still about £70 million. That said, Manchester United have proven more willing to spend huge fees on very established names. You can look at Pogba and Maguire as the best examples, I think. And so maybe the idea of spending a 9-figure sum on Harry Kane would be more consistent with Manchester United's policy than Manchester City's. I think Kane's preference would be to stay in the Premier League rather than to go abroad. Although, as you say, I think it would be Daniel Levy's preference would be the opposite, would be to sell Kane abroad rather than to sell him to a Premier League rival. So that is another potential issue to any deal happening. But you're absolutely right that it does start with Haaland, and then it becomes a question of how much money other clubs would be willing to spend on Kane as a backup, as an alternative.
I want to shift this on to the manager, Jose Mourinho. There seems to be a really good relationship there. However, there's also a possibility that if he was to leave, a different manager comes in and makes Tottenham more competitive, that Harry Kane could fulfill his desire at Tottenham. So can you explain the role of the manager in this situation?
Yeah, this is a really important point that I'm delighted to be able to clear up. There has not been a falling out between Kane and Mourinho, just like there has not been a falling out between Kane and Daniel Levy. There are lots of Tottenham players, or there are some Tottenham players, I should say, who don't like Mourinho or who aren't enjoying this season. Kane is not one of the players who does not like Mourinho. Kane, I'm told, would run through a brick wall for Jose Mourinho. I think that's been evident from his performances this year, which have been exceptional. So that there is not an issue between Kane and Mourinho. Whether or not Daniel Levy could replace Mourinho with a different manager who might be able to improve Spurs' fortunes and in doing so convince Kane to stay, I don't know. To me that feels unlikely just because we don't really know what's going to happen with Mourinho this summer. It's going to depend on the end of the Premier League season. After that, we don't know which managers might be able to come in for next season. There's just too many question marks there, I think. But there has not been a big falling out between Kane and Mourinho, and it certainly would not be true to say that Mourinho is driving Kane away from the club. That all said, if Spurs were doing better this season, I think it was more likely that Kane would want to stay. If Spurs were back around second or third, where they used to be under Pochettino, challenging for the Premier League title, then maybe Kane would want to stay. But he certainly has not fallen out with Mourinho.
The way you know Kane and the way you know Tottenham and Daniel Levy, how will relations be on that front with this situation going on, do you imagine?
Well, again, I'm told that Kane and Levy have a good relationship. That said, I don't think Levy will want to sell Kane simply, out of a sense of gratitude or debt for everything Kane's done for the club. Levy is not an easy negotiator in situations like this. That's not to say that he's never sold players, but when he sells a big player, it's only ever on his terms. Look at getting 31 million for Berbatov from Manchester United in 2008, 100 million euros for Gareth Bale from Real Madrid in 2013, even the deal to get 50 million pounds from Manchester City for Kyle Walker in 2017. In all of these cases, Levy sold one of his best players, but he did so entirely on his terms. He got exactly what he wanted out of the deal because he had the leverage in the negotiation. He had the player that the other club wanted. And I'm not saying that Levy will sell Kane. I think he probably won't sell Kane. But if he does sell him, it will be entirely on his terms. It won't be because there's been a gentleman's agreement or there's any sense that he owes Kane a move. It'll be because it's the best move for Tottenham Hotspur. And until Daniel Levy thinks that selling Kane is the best move for Tottenham, it won't happen.
The last theme is vital, and it's a similar theme we started on about the journalism in this all. When you put the piece out, it was very specific. It mentioned that he would like to leave if Tottenham don't qualify for the Champions League, and it did not say that it will happen. A lot of reaction to that. Where did this come from? Why are there no quotes? Which is a classic criticism that gets thrown at journalists. Do you want to explain the journalistic process behind this, and specifically that point about where are the quotes?
Well, I think the best answer I can give to that is that, like a lot of our news stories at The Athletic, a lot of work went into this, multiple conversations with well-placed sources. Many sources in football speak on the condition of anonymity because of the delicacy of the topics that are being discussed. I can absolutely guarantee anybody who's watching this or listening to this that we did not do this lightly, that we have very high standards of sourcing at The Athletic. And I completely understand why this is a sensitive and difficult topic for Tottenham fans. I'm a football fan. Seeing your favourite player, your team's best player for the last decade, linked away from a club and seeing it reported that he wants to leave is painful. I totally understand that. At the same time, I absolutely stand by this story, the sourcing of it. We wouldn't have written it if we weren't certain of it. And that's really all I can say on the matter without going into too much detail.
Yeah, and I'll pick up on that because I do a lot of this style of reporting, and It's the standards by which we, and I'd like to think pretty much every other media organisation, holds themselves by. We have to be trusted. That's all we can ask of the public in scrutinising our own processes and making sure that we follow them correctly. I almost want to say, do you really think we would just do this on a whim? We have to follow the right checks and balances and processes and speak to the right people. And we weigh up the same conversations that everybody watching this will weigh up when they're looking at the story. And we check and we double check with the right people. And if we have doubts of our own, we scrutinize them. In terms of the quotes, as you mentioned, the anonymity, many of these stories, not just in this realm, in sports journalism, in journalism as a whole, and some of the biggest stories you will have ever come across in journalism are not with quotes. And that's because the journalism itself is a process that doesn't necessarily demand that quotes come. Your sources may not want to be quoted, and it doesn't change the story. Sometimes it's simply not possible to provide the quotes to accompany the journalism, but it doesn't mean that it's not correct. And again, we rely on public trust on that front. Jack, thank you very much for explaining the story and the sporting side, the journalism too. We really appreciate it, and we'll see what happens in the coming weeks and months.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thanks a lot for watching, everyone. Head over to The Athletic for all of Jack's in-depth Tottenham coverage, and you can also hear him every week on our Spurs podcast, The View from the Lane.